Hey girls, I hope you are ready for another episode of Lies and Lipstick, episode 2. This one right here, I hope you have a glass of wine with you while you're watching this. If you do not have wine, go take you a shot. Keep the bottle right there because you're going to need that throughout this whole episode. You're going to need it. Let's get started. On January 13, 2010, Conyers had one of the most shocking murders. Conyers, Georgia is 20 miles east of Atlanta. Some people call it the original Hollywood of the South because they had some major productions there. They had major productions like The Originals, The Vampire Diaries, tons of Hallmark movies. But to the people that lived there, it was still small town. It was still sleepy Conyers, and murder just wasn't that thing in that city. They only had 2 murders in 1 year at one point. On January 13th, 2010, twin girls Jasmine and Tasmin come home to find their mother, Nikki Whitehead, stabbed over 80 times and left in her bathtub. Listen to me, guys. This was not a movie. This was something real. The scene was so violent and so chaotic that investigators knew that this had to be somebody that Nikki knew. When the detectives got there, the girls were able to walk the detectives through the scene to where their mother was. Nikki was in the master bathroom. Her body was partially submerged in the tub, but her head was out of the water.
See chaos. Stuff had all been thrown about. You see overturned chairs, broken vases on the floor, and you see and smell lots of blood.
You could smell it like, the rust off of a penny. It was really, really strong. Nikki was where the daughters said they discovered her.
Now, once the detectives got there, they went ahead and put the girls in the back of the van. The girls were absolutely traumatized, as you would be. One of the detectives noticed that the girl, one of the twins, was so traumatized, she was like biting. I'm gonna show you an example. She was biting the front or the back of her forearm. And he asked her, like, what are you doing? Please calm down. What are you doing? And she said that was things that she would do when she was like having a moment. Thing like that. But she said when she got really nervous and things just wasn't happening right, she would resort to biting herself. And he saw that's what she was doing. But like I said, these girls were traumatized. Find your mom, you come home from school and you find your mom in a bathtub, stabbed everywhere. I am pretty sure you are going to be traumatized as well. So, with the girls being the ones that did find their mother, the detectives took them back to the police station and took them in for questioning. They were very soft. They were very easy with these girls. These girls had just been through hell. So, they were trying to be very gentle in the way that they were treating them, the way that they were talking to them. But they had to get these questions in there. Police began asking them questions about their mother. The girls told them that Nikki Whitehead was a hairdresser. She went to Boulder College, which is a fashion school, and that she loved and adored those girls. She would do any and everything for those girls. She put them in cheerleading. She put them in dance. She loved her twin girls. Now, investigators also asked the girls when was the last time that they saw their mother alive.
That the night before the murder, Nikki had come in from, their words, partying.
And then when they woke up the next morning, they got ready for school. And when they knocked on their mother's bedroom door, she did not answer.
So basically, while the girls are at school, that leaves about an 8 to 9 hour window for Nikki to be attacked uninterrupted. While they have some detectives at the police station interviewing the girls, they still have detectives on site, on the scene, and getting every piece of evidence that they can. The detectives noted, and I've already said this before, that the crime scene was so chaotic. They could see and kind of make out everything that happened at that crime scene. They can tell that she had her back against the wall and was sliding against the wall and fighting by the way the blood spatter was against the wall. They can see, or they could tell, how she ran to the back door and grabbed the knob to open up the back door to get away from her attacker, but the back door was locked and she couldn't get it fast enough. So you see that blood on the knob, but you also see them dragging her back into the house. It was just a chaotic crime scene, and they had to get every piece of evidence from that house that they could. They didn't want to leave anything. Now, as far as outside of the house is concerned, outside was untouched. There were no windows broken, no forced entry, no door kicked open. Whoever was in that house, Nikki knew, and she let him in. But an interesting fact, the twins said to the detective when they came home, the door was locked. They had to use their key to open up the door. Now y'all know with something like this, all of my my crime detective buff girls, we all know how this goes. Anytime you get such a violent murder like this, it's always somebody the victim knows. Sitting here wondering, like, where is the girl's father? We all know it always comes to the person that's close to them. Where them girls' father at? Where is Nikki baby daddy at? When the detectives did some digging and did some investigating, and he actually disappeared as soon as the girls were born, and he was living in Canada. So he was quickly ruled out of this. But the girls did tell the investigators that Nikki had a boyfriend. His name was Robert Head. He was a truck driver. And the house that they were living in right now was Robert's house. The girls told the investigators that Robert was about 20 years older than their mom, and he was kind of like a sugar daddy situation. He provided for them, they lived there, he took care of them. A sugar daddy situation. And let me make this very clear, I am not judging anybody sugar daddy situation. You know, if you got a sugar daddy and he is strictly your sugar daddy, you gonna have to get that man some sugar. I'm not here to judge either way it go. I'm just telling you the girl said that it was a sugar daddy situation. He also said that mom had more than one boyfriend. Mom had plenty of boyfriends. And that one night, Robert heard their mom, Nikki, talking on the phone with one of her other beaux.
Have any other friends or anybody else that come over that you know of?
I've talked to a lot of men. Talked to some men, but the only one I've been hearing her talk to lately is Joe.
So with the investigator saying that Robert was the sugar daddy, and he overheard mom talking to her other beau, who's named Joe, was on the phone that night, they figured that this was definitely a love triangle that went wrong. They went down that road. The first thing they had to do was find Robert, driver, but the investigators did not have any problem hunting him down. They found the business that he worked for and was able to locate him very easily. Now, once the detective told Robert what happened and what the girl said, he did admit, yes, we did have an argument. And yes, we were arguing about Nikki talking to other guys. So the agreement was he take care of Nikki and the girls. They were to stay in his home. He understood that he was 20 years older than Nikki, so he knew Nikki was going to talk to other guys, but it was an in-home rule that Nikki was not to talk to other guys in front of him. When he was home, it was just him and her. While he was on the road, he was on the road. He was not to worry about what she was doing, but when he was home, he did not want to be disrespected in that manner. So basically, and this is just me talking, basically, it sounded like they were in an open relationship. But does open relationships really work? Like, they wouldn't work for me. They wouldn't work for me. I ain't got time. Somebody is going to get jealous. Somebody going to catch an attitude. You're not going to have time to spend time with somebody. A phone call is going to slip up when you're in front of the other guy who said, don't talk to nobody in my presence. Like, I don't know. No, open relationship would not work for me. But that's what it sounded like they were in. It sounded like they were in an open relationship. One thing about Robert and him driving that truck, they have a GPS on that truck. So the detectives were able to go and look at that GPS. They were able to see when he left town, where he was the time of the murders, and come to find out he was nowhere near that area the times that Nikki was being murdered. He was nowhere near that area. So that takes Robert off the list. Robert is cleared. It's now time to find Joe, the second boyfriend. Now, the detectives go back and talk to the girls about Joe, and the girls say they heard Joe around 3 a.m. or they heard their mother around 3 a.m. fighting on the phone with Joe. And she was screaming on the phone with Joe saying, no, you better not come to my house. That was also the night before Nikki was murdered.
About Joe.
Like, they argue a lot because she was like, have a nice life, man. Yeah, because they were arguing last night.
So let's make this clear. Nikki got into it with Robert because she got caught on the phone with Joe. Then, around 3 o'clock that same morning, Nikki is getting into it with Joe. Screaming and saying, no, you better not come to my house. This is a lot. But we keep, I hope y'all got y'all notes. I hope y'all got your eyeshadow on y'all notes, because this is a lot. I'm trying to go fact by fact so we can get this thing together. So after that, they go looking for Joe. And what the cops found out is Joe works at a barbershop and he drives a black car. Now, black car part is extremely important, because in one of the interviews with one of the neighbor said they saw a black car in front of Nikki's house around 1:30 the day of the murders. So that part was really important, that they found out that Joe drives a black car. Joe at the barber shop where he works, and they tell him that Nikki has died in a really terrible murder. And Joe is unconsolable. Then he could not get it together after they told him that Nikki had died. They did ask him, did you have an argument with Nikki? And Joe says, yes, we had an argument. After Joe tells the cops, yes, they had an argument, the cops asked him to come on down to the precinct so they can have a discussion with him and basically try to rule him out as a suspect. While the police have him at the police station, they straight up ask him, what were you and Nikki arguing about? And Joe didn't hold back. He said that we were arguing about how much she drank. She was a drinker and he didn't really like it. And he was also arguing to her about the state of their relationship. He wanted to know, what were they? Was this going somewhere? How serious was it? Joe also made it very clear that the day that Nikki was murdered, Joe was in his shop doing haircuts like he always is. So what the investigators did was they asked him, do you want to take a poly test? Do you want to take a polygraph? Joe said, sure, let's go. Not only did Joe pass the polygraph, the investigators went back to Joe's job and the coworkers definitely said, yes, he was here with us that day doing, working in the shop. So that also ruled Joe out. Here's where I'm stumped. Because if Joe wasn't at that girl's house around 1:30 during the time of her murders with his black car, who was driving the black car? Who was that?
The post office had actually logged that car because if it sits in front of a mailbox too many days, then they'll write a little complaint note and put it on the car. And so we were able to determine that that car was actually visiting someone just slightly up the street a little bit.
That black car had nothing to do with the murder, and it had nothing to do with Joe. Now, investigators didn't stop there because another neighbor told the investigators that they saw a red car parked in front of Nikki's home. And this was actually in her driveway. And they saw that car parked in front of her home the day of the murder around 3 p.m. The detectives did some asking around, and they found out that one of Nikki's friends owned a red car. So they immediately went and talked to her. Now, the first thing they asked her, they was not beating around the bush. Were you at Nikki's home the day of the murder? The friend said, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I sure was. Nikki was supposed to do my hair that day at 3. I arrived at 3 o'clock that day, but when I got there, Nikki never came to the door. That's what the friend said. The cops got her phone records, traced her phone and her location, and sure enough, she had only sat there for about 3 minutes before she left. And according to the detectives, 3 to 5 minutes was not long enough for this murder to take place. The way that the scene was, it was too chaotic. It was too much struggle. It was too much blood. Fight would have been going on for 20 to 30 minutes. It definitely wasn't the friend. She was literally there for a second. She was literally there for 3 minutes, 5 at tops, sitting in the driveway, probably calling Nikki, hey girl, I'm here, where you at? Went to the door, knocked on the door, nobody came. She got in her car, she bounced. And this is when the investigators kind of got bothered. That was their last lead. That friend with the red car was their last lead. They had nothing. And the detectives stated how they really, really felt bad for the girls. The girls had just gotten into a stable home. They literally just started staying with their mom. Before, they were staying with their great-grandmother. She was 74 years old. Her name was Della. The girls were staying with Della before they moved in with Nikki. Now here are some things that we need to know about Nikki. Nikki also grew up with her grandmother. Della is Nikki's grandmother, but the twins' great-grandmother. Nikki got pregnant at 17 years old, and from there she was on the streets. When Nikki finally got herself together, And when she got with Robert, she became a lot more stable than she's ever been. That's when she said to herself, okay, I'm stable. It is time for me to get my girls, and it's time for me to raise them myself. And that's what she did. Nikki took Miss Della to court and got full custody of her girls. And she did this for a number of reasons. I mean, Miss Della is 74 years old. She done raised Nikki. She don't need to be raising no more kids. It's time for Miss Della to sit back. It's time for Nikki to take responsibility of her girls. And she felt like the girls needed a little bit more iron fist in their life. They were 15 years old. They were getting into boys. They was kind of being real slick with stuff. Miss Della's 74 years old. She ain't catching on like how she usually do. Miss Della probably in the bed by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and the girls might be around here running a buck. Nikki felt like it was time to get hold of these girls because she already knows what life is outside of them streets, and she don't want her daughters to turn up that way. Now, one thing about Grandma was pissed that Nikki took these girls. Grandma felt like she could do it. Grandma did not appreciate Nikki taking these girls. Grandma had these girls since these girls been in Pampers. How dare you come in and take my babies? That's what Grandma felt like. But Nikki was doing the right thing. She was doing what she needed to do, and she felt that was right for the girls' well-being. We're going to take a pause for the cause right quick, and we're going to shout out Tarte. Tarte is sponsoring this video tonight. She is sponsoring Lipstick&Lies tonight, season 2. And this is my first time using this foundation, y'all. So I'm kind of excited. All right, we got it open. This is Tarte BB Blur and Tinted Moisturizer by Tarte. Ooh, Tarte. I love this, but this might not be heavy enough for the look that we going for tonight, girl. But I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it now. The look don't go for no BB cream, but you know what? We going to try it. We ain't going to knock it till we try it. So let's Tarte Blurred. What she call it? Moisturizer. Hold on. Let's take a pause for the cause. It is definitely a tinted moisturizer. Oh, it's very soft. It's very cushiony. Oh, it's very light. Oh, it's just giving me that nice blurred little. Okay. Okay, I wanted to wear the. Oh, it's just. Oh wait. It's giving me coverage. It's definitely giving me coverage, girls. BB Blur Tinted Moisturizer, SPF 30 sunscreen. Oh, I like this, guys. It is a little orange for my complexion, but that is on me. That's not on Tarte. That's the color that I chose. But that's okay, because your girl got a way of lighting it up, baby. Don't you worry about that. I'm going to try to wear this without anything. Like, I'm not going to put anything on top of it because, honey, the coverage is covering. Honey, the coverage is covered. We are also going to use Tarte Shape Tape. Anyway, let's go back to the. So the detectives asked Grandma to come down to the scene. They need to talk to her. Grandma agreed to come down to the scene, even though it took Grandma 6 hours to get down there. She finally got down there to answer some of the questions. So the detectives did ask Grandma where she was during the murder. But as the detectives is looking at Grandma and seeing how fragile she is, they know she is not able to pull off this murder. She's not able. On top of that, Grandma had a dang on good alibi. So guess what? That part is out. So just in case you getting a little lost, just in case you're getting a tad bit lost, let me bring it back to your remembrance. Okay? Just in case you lost. Robert, Sugar Daddy, didn't do it. Okay? Joe, the barber, didn't do it. Alright? The friend with the red car didn't do it. She wasn't there long enough. She panned out. The black car, who we thought was Joe's car, wasn't Joe's car. The black car belonged to a neighbor who parked his car in front of her, Lord have mercy, mailbox. That car belonged to a neighbor, the friend of a friend. They had nothing to do with it. Who I miss? And now we on grandma. Grandma, too old, too fragile, and too tired. Grandma was not able to pull this off. So guess where the detectives are back at? They are back at square one. So as detectives are talking to Grandma, everybody knows that Grandma is not happy that these girls had to go and stay with Nikki. Grandma had these girls since they was in diapers, and Grandma was not happy about this. This really did put a strain on their relationship. So detectives wanted to know, how did that affect the girls? So they started digging into the family dynamics of Nikki and Jasmine and Tasman. Now, what the detectives found out was back in 2008, the cops were called to Nikki's home. They had a family dispute. When the cops pulled up, she talked about how Nikki ran out full of bruises, full of cuts, and she was screaming that the girls had jumped her.
You're involved in any kind of a domestic situation or disturbance or any kind of physical altercation, you're going to have people that are at an elevated state of emotion. They're usually very upset, they're crying, they're yelling, they're trying to tell you what happened, which is what the case was with Nikki.
Through tears, she reveals her assailants.
Now, the officer said that when she went in to talk to the girls had absolutely no emotion. They were emotionless. Emotionless. And the officer knew that this was not the last time that she was going to see these girls and they was going to get a call like this.
Faces were stoic. They were angry. The girls had no marks on them whatsoever. To see these stoic faces, and I've been doing this long enough to know that no one is going to have that much calm about them.
So initially, the twins said they missed the bus. Okay? It took them 15 minutes to walk to school because when they missed the bus, they decided to walk. It took them 15 minutes. What the detectives did was he decided to walk that 2.5 miles from Nikki's house to school. He also contacted the school because he wanted them to grab the tape so they could see the time that the girls walked into the school. The detective said the girls told them it took 15 minutes for them to walk from the house to school. But when they looked at the tape, the girls showed up 2.5 hours later than the time they told the detectives.
The school surveillance camera shows they arrived at 10:15 a.m.
It's 2.5 hours later than what they're telling us. So that's our first irregularity.
That's a lie. How many times have you lied to me?
0.
The only individuals who we kept finding holes in stories and lies were the twins.
What the detectives is also realizing that every lead that was given to them, it was given to them by the girls. And that lead never was a solid lead. Like, it never went to anywhere. First, they gave them Robert. Robert was on the road, and Robert was nowhere close to that house. Then they gave them Joe. Well, same thing. Joe was at work. Joe was nowhere near that house, and he had a solid alibi. Everything that the girls were telling them turned out to be bull. They also said they got to school 15 minutes late. They literally got to school at 10:15. That was 2.5 hours later than what they were telling the detectives. The detectives were starting to feel uneasy, and they wanted to bring the girls in for another interview. One thing that the detectives really pointed out was how the girls told them that Joe was the one that was arguing on the phone that night at 3 a.m. with their mother screaming, "You better not come to my house." The detectives wanted to verify that. So what they did was they got a record of Nikki's phone records.
And the first suspicion that Joe was planted by the twins. They had alleged that Nikki had been in an argument with Joe the night before the murder. We were able to send subpoenas to the phone company and get phone records, and the phone call that she had been on was not to Joe. It was to a family friend that the family considers a relative. Once we interviewed this person, not only had he spoke to Nikki, but he spoke to both of the twins and thought all was well. Never would have guessed that a few hours later that Nikki would have been dead.
So the detectives come up with a theory. The detectives now think that the girls had everything to do with this murder, and they come up with their own theory. The detectives come up with the girls wanted to go back with their great grandmother, Miss Della, and they wanted to do that because the rules wasn't so Miss Della didn't run her house so much with an iron fist like Nikki did. Miss Della let them get away with a lot more, where Nikki was not there to play games with those girls. Nikki had rules, Nikki had curfews, Nikki had boundaries. Nikki made sure these girls were in class, their grades, straight A's. Nikki did not play with those girls. She was tough on them, and the girls didn't like it. They wanted to go back home where life was a little bit easier. But this was just a theory. They wasn't sure that this happened. So what the detectives did was they went back and looked at all that evidence all over again to see if they missed something in that house.
Focus squarely on the twins. They then discover a key item hidden deep within the evidence collected from the scene.
We located a journal, and the journal had specific writings about how both Jasmine and Tasmaya felt about their mom, how unhappy they were, how angry they were with her.
The detectives now have written evidence that these girls had planned to kill their mother. I'm going to read to you what the girls wrote in their journal. If we're ever going to get back to Della, if we're ever going to get back to Della, we need to do it soon. And the other twin responds, yes, she has to go. Even though they found written evidence, this was still a theory. I would have thought that it was over once they found that journal, but this is still a theory. So they go to the autopsy. And what they find with Nikki's autopsy is another shocking blow in this case.
Autopsy was able to reveal that there was actually a hair lodged in between the teeth of Nikki. That hair was matched to one of her daughters as having come from her.
The interesting thing in this case was that hair was found in Nikki's teeth. That is not someplace where you would anticipate finding DNA of a relative, of somebody that you're cohabitating with. So that's the importance of not only finding DNA, but interpreting its significance.
May 10th, 2010, the detectives go and arrest Jasmine and Tasman right before their high school graduation. And once the detectives bring the girls back to the police station and show them all the evidence they have on them, the girls finally confessed. The girls tell the detectives that the morning of the murder, they got into an argument. They got into an argument with their mom. And the argument had something to do with curfew and boys and them wanting to hang out after their curfew, and their mom just was not having it. With the mom not playing with them about that curfew and her being real strict about whatever it was with her and these boys, this brought them into a physical altercation with Nikki.
They began repeatedly stabbing their mother.
I think I picked up a knife and I stabbed her. It was multiple times.
In the head, in the neck, in the breasts, in the back.
She's just bleeding, her head bleeding, I guess from the face. And she's just bleeding everywhere. Blood on the floor.
So it sounds like Nikki was literally in there fighting for her life. She was fighting for her life. And with her having two girls around her same height, Nikki wasn't that old. You had one girl in the front and one girl in the back. You had the twin in the back choking her. And you had the one in the front stabbing her. And she was doing all she could to put up a fight.
And then, like nothing happened, the twins go to school.
And as they walk down the hall, one of them veers off from the other one to a trash can. We don't know if that was a knife. By the time we saw that video, sanitation had already picked up the school's trash, so we'll never know.
One thing I noticed about this, and it's sad, Nikki was literally trying to break a generational curse. Let's think about it. Nikki was raised by Della, her grandmother, the same grandmother whom, when Nikki had her twins, they had to stay with Della. Nikki was trying to break that. Nikki had those babies early. She got on the streets. They said she lived on the streets. And when she finally got on her feet, instead of her not taking her responsibility off grandma's back, she went and she said, no, it's time for me to get my girls. It's time for me to be responsible. I don't want them to grow up the way I did. I don't want them out here having kids the way I did. And grandma, I don't want you to be raising your great, great, great grandchildren. Nikki was trying to break a generational curse. And it is so sad that those girls did not see that. This story, y'all, this story did something to me. Because Nikki was really trying. She was really trying. She loved those girls. She loved being a mom. She loved finally being able to be a mom. And she knew that it was not going to be easy, but she still stuck it out. She still stuck with it. And did what she knew and did the best she could. And I honestly do not believe that she should have died for that. Guys, this one was too much. I know. This one was a little rough. And if you are watching and you have your glass of wine, take your glass, take it to the head, If you got you a shot, go ahead and get your shot. Take that to the head. But while you are doing that, go ahead and like, go ahead and subscribe, go ahead and leave your comments. Because this was episode 2 of Lipstick and Lies. What happened to Nikki Whitehead?